Hi there, folks. Today we're looking at stem and leaf plots. And a stem and leaf plot is data is when you display the data and it's organized by using the actual digits involved in the data values. Okay, and so this is a little bit different than a lot of the graphs we kind of look at because usually we're plotting things on kind of like an XY chart kind of thing, but this time we're just kind of organizing it based on the numbers that create the data values themselves. All right. For example, if I look at this guy. And essentially what it is just a way to abbreviate these things. So instead of having a really long list of numbers, it organizes it by the type of number that it is. All right. So for this one, it says the following is the number of home runs hit by 20 players in 1900. And so what we have here is we've got a bunch of values, some of them a little bit on the smaller side, some on the bigger side, but we're going to organize them by the type of number they are. So you see that we have a bunch of kind of single digit numbers like these guys, all right, floating around, all right. And we have a bunch of teen type of numbers like the 14, the 19, that kind of stuff. We have numbers that are in the 20 range, the 30 range, the 40 range. And so we're going to organize them that way. All right. So essentially what we do is we kind of construct a line here. And we say, okay, the single digit numbers start with a 0. And then we kind of organize these and we want to write them in order. The lowest one is a 3, then a 4, then 2 7s, and then 2 8s. Okay, and so essentially that's organizing these single digit numbers. Then we would want to move on to the first of the 2-digit numbers that are in like the teens that all start with a 1. So we have a couple of those. We've got this guy. I think that's all of them right there. All right, and again, we want to list these in order. It looks like I have a 12. So I put a 2 here because the first number is a 1, the next number is a 2. Then we have 2 14s. And so as we're reading this, the first number is listed off to the side. The second number is listed on the other side of the line. All right. And so as we're reading this, we can see there's a couple 1-digit numbers that are 0, then the number. There's a couple 2-digit numbers that are 1 and then the number. And then next, we're going to move on to the 2-digit numbers that start with a 2. And so I go through the list and I see this one and this guy and this guy, and it looks like that's all of them. But again, I want to list those in order. So there's a 21, so a 2 and then a 1, a 2 and then a 3, a 2 and then a 5. Okay. Next in the list, I'm going to go to the 2-digit numbers that start with a 3. And again, let me go through and grab all of those. So it looks like I got this guy, this one, and I think that's it. And so again, I list them in order. It looks like I have a 32, so 3 then 2, a 37, and a 39. And next, I'm going to go to the 2-digit numbers that start with a 4. And so again, I go through and I just kind of start marking them to kind of keep a tally. Looks like I've got a 1 and a 2, and that's it. But this is displaying the same sets of numbers. It gives me all the same values, and I read it as the first digit is the one on the left side of the line, and the second digit is the one on the right side of the line, but it organizes the number by the type of number that they are, all right? And now I also have the numbers from least to greatest, all right? So it kind of looks like a sideways bar graph, but it's a sideways bar graph made up of numbers, all right? All right, so if we take a look at this next one, this one's a little bit different because there's a lot of numbers that are closer to being in the same kind of category here. All right, so when we look at something like this guy, you might start off by saying, okay, in the last one, we did it by, 1 digit over here, so maybe I'll put a 1 over here, and then I'll start my stem and leaf plot. The problem is when you look at the data values, they all start with a 1. And so if I do a stem and leaf plot here with a 1 over here, I'm going to end up just writing all of my data values down pretty much the way they're written now, except in ascending order. And that doesn't really help me organize the data. So what I might have to do is I might have to extend the number of digits I put on the left-hand side. So maybe I'd do a 1 7, and then my other category would be a 1 8. But again, as I look through that, pretty much all of them are in the 1-7 category, and the 1-8 category is only going to have just a very select few. And while I could do it that way, again, it's still not a great way to organize the data. So maybe I'd go a step further and say, okay, let's do 3 digits over here. All right. And so maybe I would start, it would be a 1-7-8. Next would be 1-7-9, followed by 1-8-0, and then 1-8-1. Okay. And so this is going to spread it out a little bit, give me a little bit more organization. And really it depends on the problem for this. You kind of have to look at the data values, and if all of them are going to be lumped into 1 or 2 categories, you might want to expand your thinking a little bit. And so as I go through this, let me identify all the 1-7-8s. And again, as I go to write these, I want to put them in order. So it looks like the smallest one I have is 1-7-8-7, and I should count up how many of those I have. Let's see, 1, 2, looks like 3 of them, if I counted correctly. And then I go to do the 1-7-8-8, and so I have to count up how many of those I have. Looks like 8 of them. And then lastly, I'm going to do the 1-7-8-9s. And I think I only see 1 of those. Okay. So next, I'm going to move on to the things that start with 1-7-9. So let me erase these little marks that I have underneath here. And you could like circle them as you go or something like that, or use underline one set while you circle another set. Just try to find a way to stay organized. It might be beneficial to write all of these in order first. Makes it a little bit easier to kind of pick them out. All right. But now I'm going to do the 1-7-9s. So it looks like I got one here. All right, I think that's all of them. And so again, least to greatest, I start with the 0, followed by the 1, then the 2, then the 6. All right. And then next, I'm going to do the 1-8-0s. I think I only see 1 of those hanging around. So that's the 3. And then lastly, the 1-8-1s. I think that's all of them. So it looks like in order, I've got a 2, followed by a 6, and then a 7. All right. And again, the nice thing about this is when I look at this, I can see that most of these, that the majority of the states were added in 1780s. Then there was a few more in the 1790s. There was a lull during the 1800s, and then the 1810s. It picked up a little bit more. But again, it organized the data, and I can see where most of these data values fall. I can see that the year that had the most was 1788, that kind of thing. All right. And so again, it kind of gives us a really quick description of where the data values fall based on what kind of numbers we're dealing with. All right. For this one, this is kind of a stem and leaf plot, but it's being read in 2 different directions, okay? So if we look at the men's side, values that start with a 1, there are none over here. So there was nobody in their teens or anything like that for the men's team. But then if you look at the women's team, that first value, that represents a 16, an 18, and an 18, okay? Same thing over here. When I look at the men's side, reading this thing backwards, this would be a 21, a 21, a 23, a 24, and a 27. Okay, so that's how we read that. Going on the women's side, this would be a 25 and a 26. All right. And then again, on the men's side, this would be a 30. So again, because we have 2 different values here, and this is a nice way to compare 2 different things, and we can kind of see that the women have a lower age range than the men do, and it's really easy to see that from this, but we have to learn to kind of read some of the data backwards when we're doing this, okay? And so down here, it asks for the mean, median, and mode, and range of the men's team. So again, this is going to be a job for our calculators. Let me pull that up. All right, so I got my calculator here. Again, for the for the men's team, I have to read this as 21 is my first value. So 21 plus another 21 plus a 23 plus 24 plus 27. Again, I'm reading backwards, plus a 30. Okay, so that's 146. And then I have to divide by how many I have. So count up how many data values there were. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the average for the men's team is about 24.3. And again, the mean, sometimes we write it this way as well, okay? And then the median, these are already organized in order. If it makes you feel better to write these out, like write out the 21, 21, 23, 24, 27, 30, do that and then find the median. I'm just going to kind of start tacking them off from each end. So here's the biggest one and the smallest one, the next biggest and the next smallest. And then these two are tied for the middle, okay? The 23 and the 24. And if I remember correctly, we're going to add those together and divide by 2. It's what's halfway in between. That's going to be a 23.5 for that guy. The mode is the one that appears the most often. And so for the men, there's only one that's repeated. It's the 21. And then the range is just the biggest minus the smallest. And in this case, that is a 30 minus a 21. So the range is 9. Okay. Moving over to the women's side, it asks for the same kind of things here. If I scroll down just a little bit. So I'm going to start with the mean. And again, that's going to be a job for my calculator. So let me pull that up. Got enough space here. So the mean for the women, they've got a 16 plus 18 plus another 18 plus 25 plus 26. And then we divide by how many there are. Looks like there's 6 values also. So the average age there is a 19.83. And then the median, again, these are already written in order. But if you need to write them out, that's okay. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Looks like the biggest value here is this guy and then the smallest. So I'm taking off from each end. Next biggest, next smallest. And so it looks like these two are tied for the middle right here. And if they're the same and I add them together and divide by 2, it's going to be an 18 for the median. Okay. And then the mode is the one that repeats the most often. Well, I have a 16 repeated twice, but I also have an 18 repeated twice. They're tied, so there's 2 modes. There's a 16 and an 18. Remember, you can have more than one mode. And then the range is just the biggest value minus the smallest value. In this case, the biggest value is the 26, and the smallest value is the 16, so that's a 10. Okay, but it's all about how we read this thing. And again, if you're looking at this thing thinking, I don't like looking at that the way it's written, come down here and write it out and say, okay, 16, 16, 18, 18, 25, 26. So then the only thing new here is being able to read the stem and leaf plot. After that, you're doing the same things that we've been doing. Measures the central tendency. Mean, add them all together, divide by how many you have. Median, find the one in the middle. If there's a tie, you find the average. Mode is the one that repeats the most often, and then the range is the biggest minus the smallest, okay? But again, it's all about kind of writing this thing out. If I did the same thing with the men's, again, you're reading that as 21, 21, 23, 24, 27, and 30. Okay, and it might be beneficial just to write that out and bring it back to something that you know. Okay?